I thought I had heard everything, but then she said it, makeup doesn't work miracles anymore. Those words cut deeper than any insult I'd ever received. But little did Margaret know, that one cruel comment was the spark that would ignite a fire she couldn't put out. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. Now, let me introduce myself. I'm Gloria, 68 years old, and I've spent most of my life being the glue that holds my family together. I'm a grandmother who's seen it all, good times, hard times, and everything in between. But nothing prepared me for the day my daughter-in-law, Margaret, crossed a line that would change everything. I've always been the one to keep quiet, smile, and let things roll off my back. But after what Margaret said to me that day, I couldn't let it slide anymore. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the disrespect, the way she made me feel like I was invisible. And that's when I knew, I had to make her understand that it was a regular Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, enjoying a rare moment of peace. The sun was shining through the windows, and I was just about to start prepping for dinner when she walked in. Margaret, always with that confident, almost superior attitude, stood there with her arms crossed. I could tell something was coming. She had that look on her face. "Gloria, I think it's time we face facts," she said, her voice casual, like she was making an observation about the weather. I set my cup down, bracing myself. And then she said it. "Makeup doesn't work miracles anymore." I blinked, shocked by the coldness in her tone. There was a long pause as I stared at her, trying to process what had just happened. She wasn't talking about anything superficial, not really. She was talking about me. About my age. About the lines on my face that I couldn't hide anymore. About how she thought I was no longer good enough to be part of her world. That I took a deep breath, the hurt bubbling up inside me. But I didn't let her see it. I didn't let her know how much her words had cut through me. "I see," I said, keeping my voice steady, though it felt like my heart was sinking. "But here's the thing, no one talks to me like that and gets away with it. Not anymore. I'd spent my life caring for my family, being the strong one, and I'd let a lot of things slide. But not this. Not her. I'd had enough of being treated like I didn't matter. So, I decided right then that Margaret was going to learn a lesson in respect. One way or another, the rest of the afternoon passed by in a blur. I pretended like everything was fine, but inside, my mind was racing. I wasn't angry in the traditional sense. I wasn't going to throw a fit or make a scene. But I knew something had shifted. Something in me had snapped. Margaret had made her mistake, and now it was my turn to fix it. Not by getting back at her in the way she expected, but by showing her that I wasn't the old woman she thought I was. I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. The days that followed were strange. I couldn't look at Margaret without seeing that smug little grin of hers, the one that made me feel so small. It didn't help that she made herself comfortable in our family gatherings, always sitting in the center of things. Her opinions louder than anyone else's. She had this way of making everything seem like it was her idea, her voice, her way. And I stood by, silently watching. But no more. I had always been the quiet one, the listener. I was the type to pour a cup of tea for everyone else before taking mine, the one who smiled and nodded, never raising my voice unless it was absolutely necessary. But something about what Margaret said. It triggered something deep inside me. I started questioning every conversation, every family event. How many times had she undermined me without anyone noticing? How many times had I let it slide? I'd spent years helping my son, Michael, build his family, making sure my grandkids had everything they needed. I was the glue that held everyone together. But Margaret? Margaret had a way of twisting everything I'd done into something she could control, something she could claim credit for. And for the first time, I saw her for what she truly was, manipulative, condescending, and dishonest. I started paying attention, watching her carefully. I had nothing but time on my hands. I didn't need to go anywhere, didn't need to rush. The house was quiet, just me and my thoughts, but I used that silence. I noticed small things, the way she'd always subtly discredit my cooking, or how she'd look down her nose at my old furniture, as if it were beneath her. She'd say things like, "You should really update this place, Gloria, it's starting to look like a time capsule," But it was the way she treated Michael that really set me off. I'd seen how she'd made him doubt himself. She'd twist things, make him think that he wasn't good enough, wasn't doing enough. She'd say things like, "If you were more like my brother, you wouldn't be struggling so much." And Michael? He took it. He took it all. He'd nod, apologize, and work harder, while Margaret would sit back and watch with a grin that made my stomach turn. I wasn't going to let this go on anymore. I had raised a good son. I'd worked hard to make sure he knew right from wrong, how to be a decent man. I wasn't going to let Margaret tear him down, or me, for that matter. So, I started my plan. Subtle, quiet at first. I knew I couldn't act too hastily. Revenge isn't about making a scene. It's about making them feel the weight of their actions. Without them even realizing it at first. I started keeping track, small things. Like when she'd brag about getting the kids to do their chores. But I knew from my own experience that they never actually did it without my help. I began documenting. A photo here, a receipt there. It wasn't much, but I'd seen enough to know this wasn't the first time Margaret had stretched the truth. She had built this perfect image of herself, but like all facades, it was fragile, and I intended to shatter it, but I had to be careful. I couldn't just show my cards right away. I needed to gather everything, piece by piece, until I had a story she couldn't deny, couldn't twist. And that's exactly what I did. I hadn't expected it to go this far, but as the days passed, more things started to fall into place. It was like the more I looked, the more I found. Margaret had spun a web of lies around her life, and I was starting to see it unravel, bit by bit. It started small, like a conversation I overheard while I was sitting on the porch one afternoon. Margaret was on the phone with someone, her voice low and hushed, but I caught enough to piece things together. She was telling someone that she'd been at a meeting all morning, helping to coordinate a big event for the local charity. The problem was, I knew exactly where she'd been that morning, at the house, sitting on the couch, texting her friends and scrolling through her phone. I let it slide at first. After all, it was just one small lie. But then, there were more. A receipt for a shopping spree she claimed she'd paid for with her own hard-earned money, only I knew that Michael had paid for it. His credit card had been charged, not hers. And then there was the time she told everyone that she'd been volunteering at the local shelter, helping to feed the homeless. But when I asked one of the shelter workers, they told me she hadn't been there in months. Each lie, no matter how small, started to add up. I'd always known Margaret had a way of manipulating situations to make herself look better, but I never realized just how deep it went. And the more I uncovered, the more disgusted I became. I felt like I was living in a house built on deceit. I began to wonder, had I been blind to all of this before? Had I been so eager to keep the peace that I ignored the signs? But no, I wasn't blind. I was just too kind-hearted. I never wanted to believe that someone in my family could be so deceptive. One night, I found something that shocked me to my core, an old letter, hidden in the back of Margaret's drawer. It was from a lawyer, and it was dated a few years back. As I read through it, the words blurred together, but I caught the key point. Margaret had been in some kind of legal trouble, something related to financial fraud. It wasn't much, just a hint, but it was enough to make me pause. Why hadn't she ever mentioned this? And why had she kept it hidden? I wasn't sure yet, but I was certain this was the key to understanding her. I'd always known there was something off about Margaret. She'd never been fully forthcoming with me, always keeping a part of herself locked away. But now, as I held that letter in my hands, I realized I wasn't dealing with just a spoiled woman. I was dealing with someone who had built an entire life based on lies, but I had to be careful. If I was going to expose her, I couldn't be reckless. I needed to make sure I had everything in order. The last thing I wanted was for her to twist the truth and turn things around on me. I needed proof, hard proof that no one could deny. And that's exactly what I was going to get. The thing about revenge is that it doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. It's the quiet, calculated moves that leave the deepest scars. And I had learned over the years that patience was key. So, I waited. I gathered everything I could, photos, receipts, the legal letter that had shaken me to my core. Slowly but surely, the pieces of Margaret's web were falling into place. I remember the first time I took action. It was a Sunday, and the family had gathered at our place for dinner. It was one of those warm, comforting evenings, the kind I'd spent countless times preparing for, setting the table just right, making sure everyone had what they needed. But this time, I was doing it with a purpose. I had planned this dinner down to the smallest detail, knowing exactly when and how things would unfold. As we sat around the table, chatting about the kids' school projects and Michael's latest work trip, I slipped a small, inconspicuous envelope under Margaret's plate. I didn't say anything, didn't draw attention to it. I just kept talking, smiling, acting like everything was normal. But my heart was racing inside. I knew what was in that envelope, the first piece of evidence that would pull her mask off. The dinner went on, the usual chatter filling the room. Margaret didn't seem to notice the envelope right away. But when dessert was served, she reached for her plate, and her hand brushed the envelope. She froze for a second, but I kept my eyes on my coffee, pretending to be lost in thought. I could see the tension building in her. She was smart, no doubt about it. She knew something wasn't right, but she wasn't sure what. She picked up the envelope carefully, as if afraid it would bite her. I watched as she slid it open with her fingers, the paper crinkling in the quiet of the room. I didn't hear her reaction, but I could see the way her face tightened. The color drained from her cheeks. She didn't look at anyone else, just stared at the paper, her expression unreadable, but I knew she had read it. I knew she had seen the receipt, the one that proved she hadn't paid for the shopping spree she'd boasted about a few weeks ago. She'd always made a big deal out of earning her own money, but now, it was clear she hadn't. And as she folded the paper back into the envelope, I could feel the weight of her guilt pressing down on her. Dinner continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. The small talk was gone, replaced with an uncomfortable silence. I couldn't help but smile to myself. Margaret wasn't getting away with it anymore. She'd built this life of lies. But I had a way of unraveling it, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hide. Later that evening, as everyone gathered their things to leave, I could tell Margaret was unsettled. She kept glancing at me, but she didn't say anything. Not a word. That I knew this wasn't the end, not by a long shot. But it was a start. The first move had been made, and Margaret was about to learn that nothing stays hidden forever. The next few days were full of tension, but I wasn't going to let Margaret get the upper hand. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to figure out how to spin her way out of the situation. She was pretending like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just been caught in one of her many lies. But I could see the cracks forming, slowly but surely. She was unraveling, and I was watching it all happen, one move at a time. The thing about Margaret is that she always thought she had it all under control. She walked through life with this air of superiority, as if she had mastered the art of perfection. Her home was always spotless, her hair always done, and every social gathering revolved around her. But that was the illusion. The truth was that her life was built on the foundation of lies, and I was beginning to see it all so clearly. That afternoon, I decided to take another step. I invited Margaret over for tea. It was a quiet, innocent thing, just a couple of cups and some light conversation. I wanted to keep things casual, to make her feel like everything was normal, but I had a plan. I had already begun digging deeper into her past. And I knew I was close to finding something that would completely shake her world. As we sat in my cozy living room, sipping our tea, I could tell Margaret was on edge. She kept adjusting her posture, her eyes darting around the room as if she were looking for an escape. I wasn't in a hurry. I just let the silence settle between us, enjoying the way she squirmed under the weight of her guilt. Finally, she spoke up. "Gloria, I've been meaning to apologize for what I said the other day. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings," she said, her voice sweet, almost too sweet. But I wasn't fooled. She was playing the victim now, trying to make it seem like she was the one who had been wronged. I looked her straight in the eyes and smiled, though it wasn't a kind smile. "Oh, Margaret, I know you didn't mean it," I said, my voice calm. "But you know, it's funny. You've said a lot of things over the years that I just let slide. Little things, like your comments about my cooking, my house. You've always found something to criticize. But I never said anything." She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her smile faltering for just a moment. I didn't think it was such a big deal," she stammered. "Of course not," I said, taking a slow sip of my tea. "But the thing is, Margaret, I've been thinking. And I've realized something." I paused, letting the tension build. She leaned forward slightly, hanging on my every word. I've been so busy keeping up this illusion of everything being fine, keeping the peace, helping with the kids, doing everything for the family. But I've never stopped to think about what's been going on behind the scenes. The lies. The things you've hidden from us. Her face went pale. I could see the shift in her expression, the panic creeping in. She knew I had something. She didn't know what, but she knew it was coming. I placed my cup down on the table with a soft clink, my eyes not leaving hers. You know, Margaret, the thing about perfection is that it doesn't last. Eventually, the cracks start showing. And when they do, you have to ask yourself, how far are you willing to go to keep the illusion alive? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to get out of this, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook so easily. Not now. Not after everything she'd done. I let the silence stretch on, just a little longer. I wasn't finished with her yet. But I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her, on the edge, afraid of what might come next. The days after that conversation felt like they were stretching on forever. Margaret was quiet. Too quiet. It was like she was waiting for me to make my next move, but she didn't know what that would be. She was careful around me, her words measured and her actions cautious. But I could feel it, the tension between us was thicker than ever, and I wasn't going to let it slip away this time. She wasn't the only one on edge. Michael had noticed the change, too. He kept glancing between the two of us, sensing that something was off but never quite able to put his finger on it. Margaret, in her perfect little world, had always been the star of every conversation, every gathering. But now? Now, things were shifting. The power dynamic was changing, and I wasn't about to let her slip back into the role of the perfect daughter-in-law who had everyone fooled. It wasn't long before I found the next piece of the puzzle. One evening, while cleaning up after dinner, I came across something strange, a small, folded receipt wedged between the pages of a book on the bookshelf. At first, I thought it was just an old grocery receipt or some forgotten piece of paper, but when I unfolded it, I froze. It was a hotel bill. A hotel bill for a weekend getaway that Margaret had claimed was a work trip, only the dates didn't match up with any of the events she'd told me about. This wasn't just a lie. This was a full-blown cover-up. The dates were from just a few months ago, right after Michael had worked a particularly stressful week. Margaret had told him she was going on a business retreat for a few days, and that she'd be staying with some colleagues. But according to the receipt, she had checked into a luxurious hotel with a suite that cost over $200 a night. I knew she hadn't mentioned any of that. Not to Michael, not to anyone. It was time to confront her. I didn't want to wait anymore, didn't want to let this fester for another second. So, I called her. Margaret, I need to talk to you, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. She agreed to meet me in the backyard later that evening. Michael and the kids were out, and the house was quiet again. It felt like a perfect moment, the calm before the storm. When she arrived, I handed her the hotel receipt without saying a word. Her eyes widened as she looked at it, and I could see the panic creeping into her features. What is this? I asked, my voice low, but firm. She tried to play it cool, folding the receipt back in half and tossing it on the table. It's nothing. Just a little trip I took. For business. I didn't let her get away with it. I'm not stupid, Margaret, I said. I know you lied to Michael about this, and now you're lying to me. You told him it was a business retreat, but this, I pointed at the receipt, this isn't business. This is just another lie. She didn't respond right away. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence between us. The sound of the wind rustling the leaves in the trees above felt distant, as if the world had slowed down just for us. Then she spoke, but her voice was shaky, more vulnerable than I had ever heard it. Gloria, I didn't mean for it to get this far. I just wanted to feel important, to be something more than what I am. I blinked, taken aback by the honesty in her voice. For the first time, Margaret wasn't hiding behind her usual facade. She wasn't playing the victim. She was admitting that all of this, the lies, the deception, had been an act of insecurity. And while that might have made me feel sorry for her, it didn't change the fact that she had lied to my son, my family, and me for years. You didn't have to do all of this, Margaret, I said softly. You didn't have to build yourself up on lies. You had everything you needed right here, but you kept pushing and pushing for more. And for what? To make us think you were perfect? She hung her head, the weight of my words sinking in. I could see that she was finally starting to understand the full scope of her actions. But the truth was, it wasn't enough for me to just expose her lies. I needed to make her feel the consequences of her actions, feel the weight of what she had done to my family. To Michael, and to me. You've had enough chances. Margaret, I said, my voice steady now, the anger bubbling beneath the calm exterior. And now, you're going to face the consequences. Not from me. Not from Michael. But from yourself. You can't hide anymore. Margaret looked up at me, her face pale. For a moment, I thought she might break down. But instead, she just stood there, her expression unreadable. I wasn't sure if I had one yet, or if she was just trying to figure out what her next move was going to be, but I knew one thing for sure. The quiet before the storm was over. The storm was coming, and it was going to hit harder than she expected. The days after our confrontation were tense. Margaret had retreated into her usual silence, but I could feel her watching me from a distance, her eyes always calculating, always assessing. She was playing the long game now, trying to figure out what move to make next. But what she didn't realize was that the damage had already been done. The cracks in her perfect image were no longer invisible, and I had no intention of letting them close up again. What surprised me more than anything was the way the rest of the family reacted. Michael, as I expected, was confused. He wanted to know what had happened between Margaret and me. But the truth was, I couldn't explain it all to him, not in one sitting, not yet. Some things were too messy to put into words, too complicated to be understood right away. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep him in the dark forever. If I was going to restore the peace in our family, I had to be honest with him. I decided to sit down with Michael one evening after dinner. The kids were playing in the next room, their laughter filling the house, and for a moment, it almost felt like everything was normal. But I knew better. The truth was lurking beneath the surface, and it was only a matter of time before it came out. I need to talk to you, Michael, I said, my voice calm but firm. He looked up from his phone, his brow furrowing in concern. Mom, what's going on? You and Margaret? You've been acting strange. Is everything okay? I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to begin. But I knew this conversation was long overdue. I couldn't protect Margaret anymore. Not when she had hurt the people I loved. Michael, I said, taking a deep breath, there's something you need to know about Margaret. It's not just what you think it is. It's deeper than that. She's been hiding things from us, and I think it's time you knew the truth. I told him everything. About the lies, the manipulation, the way Margaret had played him for a fool. I showed him the evidence, photos, receipts, even the hotel bill I had found. At first, he just sat there, his face pale, his hands clenched at his sides. I don't believe this, he muttered, shaking his head. You're saying she's been lying to me this whole time? Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She's been lying to all of us. I've seen it with my own eyes. And now, it's up to you to decide what you want to do with that information. Michael sat back in his chair, the weight of the revelation sinking in. I could see the turmoil in his eyes, the anger, the confusion, the hurt. But there was something else there too, a sense of betrayal. Margaret had built a life on lies, and now it was all crumbling before him. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. She's my wife. I don't want to believe this about her, but I can't ignore it either. That's when I saw it, the first crack in Michael's unwavering loyalty to Margaret. The first hint that maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to see her for who she really was. But I couldn't push him too hard. This wasn't just about me. It was about Michael finding his own path through this mess, deciding for himself how to handle the woman he had married. The next day, Margaret confronted me. She was angry, livid, really. She came storming into my kitchen, her eyes blazing with fury. You've done enough, Gloria, she spat, her voice shaking with rage. You've planted seeds of doubt in Michael's mind. And now, you're trying to tear us apart. I didn't flinch. I'd seen this side of Margaret before, the one that tried to intimidate everyone into silence. But I wasn't going to back down. I didn't tear anything apart, Margaret, I said, my voice steady. You did that yourself. All I did was show Michael the truth. The truth that you've been hiding for years. She took a step closer, her face inches from mine. You think you've won, don't you? You think you've broken me, but you haven't. You've only made things worse. I'll make sure you regret this. I didn't flinch. I wasn't afraid of her threats. She had no power over me anymore. And deep down, I knew she had no power over Michael either. It was just a matter of time before he saw the truth for himself. That night, Michael came to me again. He was quieter this time, more thoughtful. I talked to Margaret, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And she's denying everything. She's blaming you for all of this, saying you're trying to ruin our marriage. I shook my head. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I'm trying to make sure you know the truth, Michael. This isn't just about Margaret, it's about you too. You need to see what's been going on before it's too late. He nodded slowly, his face conflicted. I don't know what to think anymore, Mom. I love her, but I don't know if I can trust her. That's when I realized, it wasn't just Margaret who was being tested. Michael was too. And in the end, it would be up to him to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. Would he stand by the woman who had lied to him? Or would he choose the truth, no matter how painful it was? The tension in the house had reached a boiling point. Margaret was on edge, her usual confidence replaced by a quiet desperation. She was trying to keep up appearances, but the cracks in her perfect world were too wide to ignore now. Every time I saw her, I could tell she was bracing herself for something. And deep down, I knew she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was late one evening when Michael and I had the conversation that would change everything. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the kids playing in their rooms. Michael sat across from me, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen. The weight of what had happened, what was happening, had finally hit him. Mom, he said, his voice shaky but firm, I've been thinking about everything. I can't ignore it anymore. Margaret. She's been lying to me, to all of us. And I think I finally see it. But I don't know what to do about it. I could hear the pain in his voice. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about his whole life being turned upside down. I could feel it too. All those years of helping him, of doing everything I could to keep our family together, were now wrapped up in this ugly mess of lies and deceit. It was a moment of reckoning for both of us. You don't have to do anything yet, Michael, I said gently. You need to take time. You need to think. This isn't a decision you make overnight. It's about your future, your family. But you deserve the truth, and so does she. His hands clenched into fists as he looked down at the table. I know. I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. I wanted to believe her. But everything she's said, everything she's done, it doesn't add up anymore. I let him talk, knowing that the hardest part was coming, the part where he had to confront Margaret. He couldn't go on living in the dark, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But at the same time, I could see how torn he was. Margaret wasn't just a woman he had married. She was the mother of his children, the woman he had built his life around. And for him, walking away from that, if it came to that, would be like tearing apart the foundation of everything he had ever known. Whatever happens, Michael, I said softly, know that I'm here for you. Whatever you choose to do with Margaret, you don't have to do it alone. He nodded, though I could see the conflict in his eyes. I knew then that he was facing one of the hardest decisions of his life. And no matter what path he chose, it wouldn't be easy. The next morning, Margaret found the courage, or maybe the desperation, to confront me again. This time, she was more subdued, quieter than I had ever seen her. She wasn't making demands or throwing accusations. She was just standing there, her eyes downcast, looking smaller somehow. Gloria, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know you've been talking to Michael. I know you've been trying to turn him against me. I just want to ask you one thing. Why? Why now? Why destroy everything we've built? I stared at her for a long moment, trying to find the words to explain. It wasn't just about what she had done to me or to Michael. It was about the lies she had woven around her life, how she had tried to control everything, including the truth. You think I'm trying to destroy everything? I asked, my voice calm but with a bite of truth behind it. No, Margaret. You did that yourself. I'm just giving Michael the chance to see who you really are. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she didn't say anything. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. I could see her struggling, trying to find some way to salvage her position, but there was nothing left to salvage. The truth was out now, and it was too late for her to turn back. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she said, her voice cracking. "I just wanted things to be perfect. I thought if I could make everyone believe that everything was fine, that everything was in its place, it would be easier." I shook my head slowly, the sadness in my chest growing. "Perfection is a lie, Margaret. It's all a lie. And now it's time for you to face it." The confrontation hung in the air like a storm cloud, the tension too thick to breathe through. I knew Margaret was reeling, but I also knew that nothing could change now. The tipping point had come, and there was no turning back. As I watched her walk away, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of the end for her marriage to Michael. Would he choose to stay with her, despite everything? Or would he finally open his eyes and see the truth? It was all up to him now, and I knew that whatever happened, the family would never be the same again. The days that followed were full of unanswered questions and emotions that I couldn't quite name. Michael was distant, caught in a whirlwind of guilt, confusion, and rage. Margaret was on edge, but she had stopped pretending to be the perfect wife. She couldn't. The weight of everything she had done was finally catching up with her. And it was showing in the way she moved, the way she spoke. The way she tried to control every situation. That I knew it was time for the final confrontation. I could feel it deep in my bones. The moment when everything would come to light. There was no more room for lies, no more room for pretending. It was time to face the truth, no matter how ugly it was. That evening, I asked Margaret to meet me in the garden. I had already told Michael I was going to do this, and although he didn't fully understand why, I think he knew it was something that needed to happen. He didn't want to be a part of it, but he knew it was time for closure. The air was cool, the sky darkening with the promise of rain. I stood at the edge of the garden, waiting. Margaret arrived a few minutes later, her face pale, her eyes red from what I assumed had been a sleepless night. She walked toward me slowly, almost hesitantly, as though she weren't sure what this moment was going to bring. "What do you want from me, Gloria?" she asked, her voice shaking with frustration. "You've already turned Michael against me. What more do you want?" I looked at her, seeing her for what she truly was. Not the perfect daughter-in-law, not the woman who had tried so hard to appear flawless, but just Margaret. A woman broken by her own lies, trapped by her insecurities, and desperate to keep up a facade. "I don't want anything from you, Margaret," I said softly. "I just want you to face the truth. The truth that you've been hiding for years. It's time for you to come clean, to stop hiding behind your lies." She scoffed, stepping back as if the truth itself might burn her. "You think it's that easy? That I can just confess everything and make it all go away? You have no idea what it's like to live a life like mine." "I have an idea," I replied, my voice steady. "I've seen how you manipulate, how you lie, how you play the victim. And I've watched Michael, my son, hurt because of it. You didn't just hurt me, Margaret. You hurt him too. And you owe him the truth." For a moment, there was silence between us. The only sound was the rustle of leaves in the wind. Then Margaret spoke, her voice softer, almost broken. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I was just trying to survive. I thought if I could make everything perfect, make everyone believe in me, then maybe, just maybe, I could be enough. But I wasn't. I'm not." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, and something in me softened. For a fleeting second, I felt sorry for her, sorry for the woman who had spent so much time hiding behind a mask, so much time pretending to be something she wasn't. But then reality came crashing back. It wasn't about feeling sorry for her. It was about justice. It was about making things right. "Being perfect isn't what makes you enough," I said, my voice filled with conviction. "You don't need to lie to be loved, Margaret. You need to be honest. You need to take responsibility for what you've done." Margaret's face crumpled then. The tears she had been holding back finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to fix what I've done." I stepped closer to her, my heart aching for the woman who had caused so much pain. But I knew that the only way she could truly heal, if she ever would, was by facing the consequences of her actions. You can't fix it, Margaret, I said gently. But you can start by telling Michael the truth. All of it. And you can start by taking responsibility for the choices you made. That's the first step. She nodded slowly, her body trembling. I will, she whispered, barely above a breath. I'll tell him everything. As she walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The storm had finally passed, and now it was up to Margaret, and Michael, to decide what came next. I had done all I could. I had fought for the truth, fought for my son, and in the end, that was all I could control. Later that night, Michael came to me, his face a mix of exhaustion and relief. I talked to her, he said quietly. She told me everything. All of it. I didn't need to ask for details. I could see the sadness in his eyes, the weariness that came with the realization that everything he thought he knew was now shattered. But I also saw something else, a sense of clarity. Michael had made his choice. He had chosen the truth, even if it hurt. I'm proud of you, Michael, I said, wrapping my arms around him. You did the right thing. And now, you can start healing. You both can. As I held him, I realized that this was the way things were meant to be. The truth had come to light, and justice had been served, not through vengeance, but through honesty and accountability. It wasn't the ending I had imagined, but it was the one we all needed. In the days that followed, the house felt different. The silence was heavier, but it wasn't the same silence I had once dreaded. It wasn't the uncomfortable, unresolved quiet that had filled the space before everything came crashing down. No, this silence was a quieter kind of peace. The kind you find after a storm has passed, when the air still smells fresh but the ground is wet with the weight of what's been left behind. Margaret and Michael had separated for a while. She stayed in a small apartment nearby, and I saw her a few times, though not for long. She had promised to work on herself, to rebuild what she could, and that's something I could respect. I wasn't ready to forgive her, not yet, but I could see the remorse in her eyes, something she'd kept hidden for so long. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for her to heal, if she was willing to face her demons head-on. Michael, on the other hand, was still figuring things out. I knew he was hurting, but I could also see the strength in him that had been buried under years of manipulation. He was different now. Stronger, more certain of who he was and what he needed from life. And I could see it in his eyes. He was ready to rebuild, not just his relationship with Margaret, but with himself. As for me, I spent my days as I always had, slow and steady, filled with routine. The smell of morning coffee, the sound of birds chirping outside my window, the feel of the soft chair beneath me as I read my books in the quiet of the afternoons. The familiar, comforting moments of life hadn't changed. But something inside me had. I'd learned something valuable through this whole ordeal. Something I think only comes with age, with time. It's not about revenge. It's not about getting back at the people who hurt you or trying to fix everything. It's about knowing when to speak up, when to fight for the truth, and when to let go. It's about finding peace. Not by hiding from the truth, but by facing it head-on. Even when it hurts. I remember one evening, just a few weeks after everything had happened, sitting down with Michael and the kids. We were having dinner, just the four of us, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were all truly together again. There was still healing to be done, still broken pieces to pick up, but in that moment, I knew we were moving forward. Thanks, Mom, Michael said, his voice quieter than usual, but filled with meaning. For being there, for everything. I don't think I could have gotten through this without you. I smiled softly, reaching over to squeeze his hand. You don't need to thank me, Michael. You've always had the strength in you. I just helped you see it. And in that moment, I realized that I hadn't just helped Michael. I had helped myself, too. In facing the truth, in standing up for what was right, I had found something I hadn't even known I'd been missing. A peace that came from knowing I had done the best I could. From knowing that justice had been served, not in the way I'd imagined, but in the way that truly mattered. As I looked around the table, at my family, I understood something else. The storm had passed. The lies had been uncovered. And now, we had the chance to rebuild, piece by piece. It wouldn't be easy. It never is. But we had the truth, and with that, we had the chance to move forward. I'll tell you this, sometimes. The greatest strength comes not from getting revenge. Not from punishing those who wronged you, but from finding the courage to face the truth and let it change you. Because that's the only way to truly heal. And when you heal, you can move forward, and that, my dear, is the greatest kind of justice there is.